A modern cruise ship is, structurally speaking, almost impossible to fall off by accident. Railings are built chest-high, pools are signed in 3 languages, every cabin door comes with a printed warning about climbing on the balcony. Marine investigators are blunt about it. You do not simply fall off a cruise ship. Something has to go wrong at the rail. The 6 stories ahead are about the kind of person who goes wrong on purpose. Case 1. Last lap in the Neptune. On August 7, 2014, the Sapphire Princess was sailing through the East China Sea on a route between Shanghai and Jeju Island, Korea. The Neptune pool sat on deck 14, forward of the buffet area, around 5 meters long and a little over 2 meters deep at its deepest point. The water was unsupervised. The signs above it were unambiguous. No lifeguard on duty. Swim at your own risk. The signs had been printed in English and overlaid with a Chinese translation specifically for this Asian route deployment. A passenger surnamed Bayan Hua, 29 years old, walked into the pool area in the late morning. She was alone. Pool design on a moving ship is its own thing. The water sloshes against the sides as the vessel rolls. Depth changes are signposted but not always obvious in the moment. The deepest point of the Neptune pool was deeper than Bayan Hua was tall. There were no dedicated attendants watching the water, no CCTV coverage of the deck, and no formal risk assessment had ever been conducted by Princess Cruises about how a swim-at-your-own-risk pool actually behaved when someone got into trouble. She got into trouble. The last positive sighting of her, alive and on the surface, was around 30 minutes before another passenger noticed a dark shape on the bottom of the pool and started shouting. By then, every person who could have helped her in the first 60 seconds had already moved on to lunch. 2 crew members from a nearby food outlet ran over. A passenger jumped in and pulled her up. 5 or 6 bystanders gathered, but none of them started CPR. The Serbian catering assistant who phoned the emergency number reached an Asian customer service agent on the other end of the line who could not understand him, and the call had to be transferred. By the time the ship's medical team arrived and started compressions, she had been underwater far too long. She was pronounced dead at the pool. Her family declined an autopsy. Local police issued a death certificate listing the cause as drowning. The UK Marine Accident Investigation Branch, because the ship was British flagged, opened a formal investigation. The MAIB report, published in 2015, was direct. Princess Cruises had conducted no documented risk assessment for its pools. The crew were not trained in basic medical first aid. The signs warning passengers were treated as a substitute for actual supervision rather than a complement to it. Marine inspectors recommended lifeguards be considered standard. As one MAIB officer put it in a follow-up statement, the cost of a lifeguard chair seems trivial compared to the benefit of preventing someone from drowning. In the years that followed, Princess Cruises did not add lifeguards. A near drowning happened on the same ship the next August. A separate drowning happened on the sister ship Diamond Princess in June 2015. The signs stayed exactly where they were. Case 2. Closed pool, open bar. 5 years later, on the Caribbean Princess, a different ship in the same fleet, a passenger walked the same lesson into the same kind of water and drowned the same kind of way. The date was June 14, 2019. The ship was on a 7-day voyage out of Fort Lauderdale, returning home from Cozumel, Mexico. The man at the center of this case was anonymous in news coverage, in his 30s, on holiday with friends. The night before he died, he had been at the 24-carat gold deck party on the upper deck pool area, then at Skywalker's Lounge in the early hours of the morning. He'd been drinking heavily. His group, by their own later accounts, had been drinking heavily for hours. Around 3 in the morning, a small subgroup left Skywalker's and made their way down to the Neptune pool on deck 15. According to other passengers later interviewed, the pool's safety net, which is normally pulled across the water at night to prevent exactly this scenario, was not in place. The group sat on the edge with their feet in the water. He decided to swim. 2 hours later, around 5 in the morning, his body was found at the bottom of the pool. CPR was attempted on the wet tile. It did not work. The medical team pronounced him dead in the ship's infirmary. By the time the body was being placed into a body bag on deck 15, the sun was coming up over the Caribbean, and the ship was steaming back toward Fort Lauderdale, where the Broward County medical examiner would conduct the autopsy. Other passengers who had been in the area later disagreed with each other about whether the pool had technically been closed. Some said it was open. Some said it should have had the net on. What every account agreed on was that no member of the crew was watching the water at 3 in the morning, that the man and his friends were heavily intoxicated, and that he had entered the pool of a moving ship at a time when the only person responsible for whether or not he could swim was him. The same pool design failure that had killed Bayan Hua 5 years earlier on a Princess ship was still in place. The same swim-at-your-own-risk signage was still considered, by the company, sufficient. The drink package was still unlimited. The night was still dark. And the man, by the time the music had stopped at Skywalker's, was no longer in any condition to make the call about whether the water was a good idea. A passenger interviewed later put the daily reality on these decks plainly. There were always young people drinking until 4 in the morning by these pools, she said. The ship knew. The ship just kept selling them drinks. Case 3. The frame they filmed him in. In August 2024, Norwegian Cruise Line's Norwegian Spirit was sailing a regional Asia route, working through stops at Nagasaki in Japan, Jeju Island in Korea, and Taiwan. Among the passengers was a Taiwanese man in his 40s, never publicly named in the English-language coverage that followed. He was, by every account that emerged later, an ordinary cruise passenger on an ordinary holiday. It was night when he died. The wind was up, the ship was moving, and the upper deck was largely empty except for one family who had walked outside to take a video. A father was filming his wife and child against the dark backdrop of the open sea. The framing was wide enough to catch most of the rail behind them. The Taiwanese man was at the rail. He was leaning on it. Marine engineers who later watched the recording pointed out something almost everyone misses. Cruise ship railings are built deliberately at chest height for an average adult, specifically because a chest-high rail catches you when you stumble. The way you defeat that engineering is by leaning your torso over it. The pivot point moves from your sternum down to your hips. You become a lever balanced on the rail. A small roll of the ship, or a misstep, or a moment of distraction takes you over. On the family's video in the top of the frame, the man appears as a soft blur near the rail. Then, in real time, he disappears. The camera does not catch the splash because it is pointed at the wife and child. The audio catches a shout. The family who had been filming were the first to realize what had happened. They ran to the rail. Other passengers came out to see. The crew sounded a man-overboard signal, and the Spirit turned, deploying its searchlights and coordinating with regional coast guards. They found his body, eventually. Resuscitation was attempted and failed. The cause of death was given as drowning following a high-deck fall into the sea at night. Authorities in the region opened an investigation. No foul play was suspected. Norwegian Cruise Line issued the standard statement of sympathy and the standard reminder about its safety rules. The video became the case in the public mind. An ordinary tourist family had filmed an ordinary holiday memory and accidentally captured a man's last second above water. The family later spoke to a Taiwanese press outlet and said something every cruise line spokesperson has now been quoted echoing. "We were shocked," the father said, "to realize we had captured the exact moment the man fell. A nightmare we will never forget." Maritime commentators in the weeks after repeated the line that gets repeated every time. You do not simply fall off a modern cruise ship. Something has to go wrong at the rail. He had leaned just far enough. What also went unspoken in the official record was the part that mattered most to anyone trying to make sense of it. He had walked to the rail of his own accord. He had leaned of his own accord. The video did not catch a push or a fight or any kind of foul play. It caught the second when an adult human being on holiday on a clear night decided that the engineering between him and the sea was negotiable. The engineering on the matter of his weight crossing its design limit was not. Case 4. The shot for the group chat. In July 2025, on Royal Caribbean's Icon of the Seas, the largest cruise ship ever built, A male passenger in his 20s or 30s, never publicly named, climbed onto a railing he was not supposed to be on, lost his footing, and fell. The setting was an upper deck pool area during what witnesses described as a party-like evening, the kind of mid-cruise night when the music gets louder and the drinks keep arriving, and the line between performing for your friends and performing for the camera blurs into one long video roll. He stepped up, his friends had their phones out, and he balanced near open space with his arms slightly out. He was not posing over water. The drop on the wrong side of the railing was onto a lower hard deck. Modern cruise ship architecture is a strange place to attempt acrobatics. The decks are tiered, the levels stack vertically with hard surfaces in between, and a fall from an upper pool deck does not end in a swimming pool splash. It ends on a slab of metal and tile a few stories below. He did the small things people do when they have decided to climb something they should not have. A pose, a laugh, a shift of weight to make the photograph look the way he wanted it to. Then, a micro-event. The ship rolled slightly. His shoe slid on the wet deck. His center of gravity went past the wrong side of the rail. He fell. He hit the lower deck. The impact was the kind of sound witnesses would later describe by saying they preferred not to. Friends screamed. Some kept recording. Others rushed to the rail and looked down at his motionless body on the deck below. Crew arrived within seconds. Medics started working on him. Reports differ on whether he died at the scene or shortly after evacuation, but the injuries were practically unsurvivable. Royal Caribbean issued a statement about a guest fall and offered condolences. The clip, captured by phones across multiple decks, traveled the standard internet route. By the next morning, it was on every cruise news channel and every safety influencer's TikTok. The conversation underneath the videos was the same conversation it always is. Cruise lines design these railings, marine engineers said in interview after interview, specifically so that an accident is almost impossible. To go over the side of a Royal Caribbean ship requires you to override that engineering on purpose. He had wanted, in those last few seconds, a shot for the group chat. He had got something else. The friends who had been filming would now have, on their phones, the last moments of his life. Some of them would delete the file. Some would hand it to police. None of them would ever willingly watch it again. Case 5. The selfie that cleared the rail. This next case is a composite. It is built from documented real cases where passengers climbed onto the outer railings of cruise ships specifically to take selfies, and from the maritime investigators who have, after each one, said the same things. It happens often enough that it stops being individual stories and starts being a pattern with a name. The composite passenger here is a man in his late 20s on a warm-weather Caribbean cruise. He has been at the bar with friends for hours. He posts daring travel content for an Instagram audience that is, he tells himself, growing. He has built a personal brand in his own description around fearlessness. He thinks the ship's rules about not climbing on railings are written for tourists who have not earned the right to ignore them. Around midnight, he and his friends drift outside to the open promenade deck. The ocean is black. The wind is up. He spots a railing along the outer edge of the deck, the one with multiple posted signs telling passengers in 3 languages not to sit on it, not to stand on it, and not to lean over it. The signs are universally ignored by passengers who think the signs are written for someone else. He climbs up, one foot on a low bar, the other up onto the actual railing itself. He gets a friend to film him. He poses, drink in hand, ocean roaring behind him. The friend says something like, "Just one good shot." The ship rolls slightly. A gust comes off the water. His weight shifts. His hand grabs at air. He goes over. The drop from a typical cruise ship outer rail is between 40 and 70 feet to the water. The water, hit from that height, has roughly the surface tension of concrete. Many passengers in this exact scenario are knocked unconscious on impact. Even the ones who stay conscious are in cold open ocean at night, with the ship's hum receding behind them and the kind of darkness that swallows shouting. The friends scream. Someone runs for crew. The bridge gets the report. The captain orders a turn and a man-overboard procedure. Searchlights sweep the water. Coast Guard and other ships in the region join. Hours later, the search is either successful in recovering a body or it is suspended. The investigation that follows always reaches the same finding. The CCTV shows him on the wrong side of the rail. The cruise line is not at fault. The cause of death is listed as accidental due to the passenger's own actions. As one cruise industry expert put it after a real version of this case, you do not fall off a modern cruise ship unless you are doing something silly and dangerous, like standing on balcony railings. Case 6. The balcony was never a stage. This last case is also a composite built from the same documented pattern. A passenger, drinking on a balcony, climbs onto the railing at night, slips and goes over. It happens often enough that nearly every major cruise line has at least one example in its files. The composite woman in this case is in her 40s on a girls' trip cruise to celebrate a friend's birthday. She's been drinking since the airport bar in the morning. She has, throughout the cruise, complained about 3 different staff members, left 2 negative reviews drafted in her phone notes, and asked twice to speak to the ship's hotel director over what she described as a service issue. Her friends find this embarrassing. They have stopped pushing back on her behavior, because pushing back makes her louder. On the 3rd night of the cruise, the group returns from the late show drunker than usual. She wants before bed a balcony photo, the kind that announces she is at sea. The cabin is on the 7th floor. The balcony has a metal railing about waist height. The booking confirmation she received before sailing included a clear line about not sitting or standing on the railing. The cabin door has a printed reminder. The crew, during embarkation safety briefings, mentioned it. She climbs onto the railing. She sits sideways, facing the sea, glass of wine in one hand, phone in the other. She asks one of the friends to take the picture. The mechanics of what happens next are basic. 3 more drinks than her body can clear, a center of gravity that no longer belongs to her, a lean forward to set the wine glass down on the rail behind her. The glass tips. Her right leg shifts a few centimeters. There is a wobble. She laughs. Then there is nothing under her at all. She falls past the lower decks. She hits the water at speed. The impact alone is sometimes enough. The cold is enough on its own most nights. The ship hums on for several seconds, oblivious, before the friend who was holding the phone drops it and starts screaming for help. By the time the bridge has been alerted and the man overboard procedure has begun, she is already half a kilometer behind the vessel, and the lights from the deck above are already too high overhead to be useful. The search continues for hours. The next morning, the captain announces, in the kind of careful voice these announcements always use, that the search has been suspended. The investigation that follows finds, as it always finds, that the cruise line provided multiple warnings, that the railing complied with international design standards, and that the passenger had voluntarily climbed onto a structure that was never meant to hold a person's full weight. Maritime investigators have, in the wake of dozens of these cases, said the same thing in different words. The balcony was not a stage. It was the safety system that was meant to keep her on the boat. She climbed onto the wrong side of it. 6 people. 6 versions of the same conversation between a passenger and a piece of marine engineering specifically designed to keep them alive. The pool was a meter deep at the shallow end. The pool was closed at 3 in the morning. The railing came up to your chest. The balcony booking confirmation said, "Do not climb." None of them stopped what was coming. Marine investigators have a sentence they keep using in different cases. You do not simply fall off a cruise ship. Something has to go wrong at the rail. The thing that has to go wrong, almost every time, is a decision. So here's the question worth leaving with. The next time you see a sign on a cruise that reads, "Do not climb," who exactly do you imagine they meant? If this video helped you think twice, hit the like button and subscribe. Take care of yourselves out there. The railing is not a suggestion.